Let's get started in today's training. 2026 success starts today. And what I mean by this is you need to look out to the future of 2026 while we're dealing with today, right? We always have today in front of us that we're dealing with, but we've got to focus on 2026 so that we don't lose out on it. You're going to see this motto or whatever that I put at the bottom: one team with one plan, chasing one goal. That's the whole idea behind today's training. It's really to make sure when you look to 2026 success, in particular, what I want is that your whole company is one team around one goal, right? With one plan to achieve that goal. So one team, one plan to achieve one goal. Keep that in mind, because that is really the big idea of what I want to share today. And I got that from my friend Tim Kelly, who's over at Janus Research, Large Prime, but he got it from the CEO of Ford a little while back when he came in and Ford was slinking down, and he had to rally them around just one goal, right? One plan, one goal. Why do we have all these different things we're doing? Let's just come back and bring Ford up. And he did. And you can do the same thing in your company if you have one team, one plan, and one goal. Right now, as I mentioned, we're all kind of thinking about FY 2025 end of the year spending. In fact, I just did a training about it this week. And that's normal. That's natural for us to think, today is June 6th, which is the anniversary of D-Day from World War II. And as you think about end of the year spending, June, July, August, and September, that totally makes sense that you're trying to go after some of the end of the year spending that agencies will be doing. But also 2026 revenue happens with 2025 sales. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind, is that as you go forward out there, especially as your business gets bigger and bigger, you're doing $5+ million, you'll really begin to understand this, that 2026, the activity that you do in 2026 really should be thinking about 27's revenue and beyond. It's okay that you're going to pick up some wins in 26 or even right now in 2025, but really you want to be looking 12+ months out. That's how you have predictability in your revenue. So that's why I'm saying 2026 needs us. And I think that's supposed to say, but 2026 needs us, if you're looking at my slides. So I want you to set a revenue goal, whatever that revenue goal is for your company. I said this training is primarily targeted at companies doing $5+ million. The training that I'm about to do came from activity that I did working with $20+ million companies that were getting ready to graduate large. I would watch them have all these discussions around strategic plan and pull different people in and spend months. And the reality is it ended up creating a strategic sales plan for the next year for the company, but no one read it. And no one could probably quote what was in it in any kind of realistic way. And when I was watching that, I said, well, let me figure out how to do that in one page. And you'll see me talk about that more. But it begins with you setting a revenue goal. 2026, I want to be a $5 million company. That means I'm telling the IRS I pulled in $5 million, or a $20 million or a $40 million company. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You could still be a $1 billion company and you're trying to go to the next billion or something. It's the exact same process. You set a goal and then you back it up. You reverse engineer, how are we going to hit that revenue goal? So for you and for today's training, make sure you track that revenue goal in your head, because when I talk about different things, you might be able to write a note down that says, I got this idea and that idea related to my specific company. Then I want you to know where your revenue is coming from. And I'll talk about how do you do that. But you don't just set a revenue goal and go, good luck, I'll see you at the end of the year and I hope we find out. No, I want you to set a revenue goal and say exactly where it's going to come from. Don't be surprised where it's going to come from. In fact, I put here, I want at the beginning of 2027 for you to sit there and say, I said where I was going to make my revenue here, and I did it. I said I was going to get it from this customer, this customer, and this customer, and I was going to get this much revenue, and I did. Don't be surprised where your revenue comes. Even if you're a success, that's not repeatable. Surprise revenue is not repeatable. Predictable revenue is repeatable. I put this thing down, and I really want you to understand this. I've been doing sales for 30 years plus. And so, and I hit my revenue goals. I started doing sales even before 18, but a true sales job where they hired me as a salesperson was when I was 18. I was a vacuum cleaner salesperson. I went door to door selling vacuum cleaners. And when I got the job, I was given a territory. They said, you could sell here. I'm like, well, wait, why not over there? That's where the rich neighborhood is. They're like, that's not yours. That's Bob's territory. I'm like, damn. And that's how sales is done for a lot of us, especially on the product sale type thing. We get a territory and then we're expected to hit our goals in there. And so this is really important for you to pay attention to, because I'm going to talk about this today. I'm going to talk about how you should set a territory for yourself. And you can do that in the government. It's a little different, but you can do that in the government. And then you don't deviate. You don't go outside the barriers of your territory. You get the sales that you determined were in there, and I'm going to get them. So I'll talk to you about that as we go forward. I'm going to break up today's training about FY2026 sales planning and strategy into three main ways, because this is how my strategy wheel looks. And this is what a strategic plan for sales goals and sales success looks like. Choose the customers. I'm going to talk about this, as I mentioned a minute ago. Determine where your revenue is going to come from. Determine who your strategic partners are, right? Choose your strategic partners and then work with them for the next year. Don't really deviate unless they fail you. And then the third one is clarify exactly what you sell. Don't sell everything. Don't be confused about what you sell. Even if you niche down, but you still can't really clarify what you're selling, then you haven't really niched down. You're just still kind of bouncing around. Success in 2026 will come from your sales in 2025. So right now, even end of the year spending, if you land a contract in the next 4 months with end of the year spending, theoretically, especially if you're in service-based business, that's the next 5 years. And so you're working really hard right now to try to land 2027's revenue. So you want to clarify what you're selling. This is what we're going to cover down on today, and I'm pretty excited about it. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, co-founder of GovCon in a Box, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner after I got out of the Army. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we have repeatable, predictable results. That is exactly what I want for you for 2026, is predictable results. And that's why I'm doing the training I'm doing today. If you haven't connected with me or followed me on LinkedIn, definitely come over and do so. Say hi. And then make sure inside the chat, there's all sorts of people you can connect and engage with. We have well over 100 people who are signed up for today's training. They're kind of straggling in here on a Friday, but engage with the people in the community. This is your network. My network is yours because you're in my network. That's just how networks work. Your network is my network. It's a beautiful thing about networking. By the way, I have upcoming training, but I rarely plan the training until the weekend. I'm like, oh, let me do next week's training. So look for me tomorrow or the next day for what next week's trainings are. Okay, very quickly, I just wanted to show you this wheel, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but this is what I meant by a strategic plan in a wheel format. So I took pages and pages of a strategic plan and said, that's all fluff and it's useless. I just need to know, who am I selling to? Who are my partners and what am I selling? And that's exactly what we have in here. The priming is who am I selling to? The subbing here in the light blue is who are my partners, and what do we sell over here on the left is that. And so I'll come back and talk more about that. But what I'm discussing in today's training fits right on that wheel. When you understand the customers that you want to work with, the partners you want to work with, and what you sell, it fits on that strategic wheel. And then you put it on the wall. Every person in your company puts it on the wall. We all say the same thing, right? One team, one plan towards one goal. Okay. So first thing I want to talk about is choosing your federal customers, right? This is really important. You don't want to leave anything up to chance. You can have bonus, like chance can handle the bonus kind of activity, but your strategic planning should be very specific. And that starts with choosing the customers you want to work with. You're in the federal market. Business success should not be reactive. It should be proactive. You should proactively say, I'm going into these customers. And then you do that. You should not go into 2026, for example, at the end of the year and go, oh, look at that. Our customers are EPA, State Department, and Department of Education. Hey, that's a reactive set of customers who might not be here, right? You want to proactively choose the customers that are going to be best for your company. The second thing that I put here is that it takes FOMO. It takes courage to fight FOMO. This is a really important thing for you to understand, in a truism, that fear of missing out, FOMO, is such a risk to us. you have to fight that risk, and it takes courage to fight it. And what I mean by FOMO is if you choose 3 customers, let's say you chose, FEMA, Department of Army, and Department of Energy or something, and those are really big for the moment. But let's just say you chose those 3. FOMO is when you start looking over at a different agency. Like maybe you start looking at HHS. It's like, well, what are they doing? My friend's doing some business over there. I heard about stuff. It doesn't matter. You have to choose your customers and then stick with them to grow. If you pick the right customers, which I'll talk about in a minute, but if you pick the right customers, they will lead to your success. You just have to work towards that success. If I show this graphic at the bottom, they call it a plateau of latent potential. I call it delayed gratification. But the idea is on the left side, you see the results. In the beginning, you're getting minimal results. And at the top, you're getting maximum results. And the same thing over on the bottom. And let me just can I move my picture over here? No, it doesn't let me move my picture. Let me turn my camera off. On the bottom is time. You see that? And so there's these 2 curves here, 2 lines that you're seeing. And some of us actually think that straight arrow line that's going left to right, that the more I work, the more I'll make. Like it goes 1 for 1 kind of thing. But that's not how it happens. The reality is you're working a lot and getting no results in a plan like I'm talking about. When you choose to go into an agency and you really don't have a lot of presence, you're going to work a lot but get 0 results or very close to 0 results. But the more you work, the closer you'll get to results. And then the idea is the further along, you'll work less time and you'll put less effort into pursuing, let's say, the Army. You'll get less, you'll put in less time, but you get much bigger results because you already have relationships. You already know a lot of people who are out there. Maybe you've already established a pipeline that goes out several years. And this goes back to the FOMO, right? You've got to have the courage to fight the FOMO once you pick your target customers. Be okay with delayed gratification because you know that it's going to give you a massive upside later. The third bullet I have here is choosing your federal customers. You want to determine your 2026 revenue. If I just pop over here really quick to the slide, you can see that I said my 2026 revenue in this example is $8 million. And so if I look at the priming, I'm saying, well, I want $6 million of it to come from prime contracting. And that means for me and for this particular customer I was doing, they wanted to get into the DoD solidly, right? And so Army, Navy, Air Force, they wanted to pull up a solid $1 million next year, or in this case, 2024, right? And then they wanted $3 million from what we call the fourth estate and DoD. And so the idea is you can see me going even farther down. In the Navy, it's not all their buying commands. It was 3, NAV-C, NAV-SUB, and NAV-WAR, because those 3 aligned to what they were selling. And this is something you want to do. It begins with you determining your 2026 revenue goal. Then you start breaking it out and saying, which ones of the agencies do I want, how much from each agency, et cetera. I'm not going to go too far into that because I'll just use up all my time. But the next thing I want you to pay attention to is you saw it already where I said the Navy and then NAV-WAR, NAV-SUB, and NAV-C. You want to choose an agency. And an agency could be a department. It just depends on the size. So an example is if you go into DHS, DHS is a department, but really it's pretty darn big, right? And so if you look at DHS, you want to pick what are the agencies within DHS that definitely align with what we're doing. But you don't want to sit there and say, well, I'm going to go DHS, DOD, and HHS. It's like you might as well say I'm going everywhere. You need to make it realistic. You can't get in everywhere. So choose 3 departments, 4 departments, whatever fits for the size of your company. And again, I'm not really teaching the beginners at all right now. Beginners, you should be thinking about how can I team up and sub for somebody. But you want to choose those departments and agencies the same way I did. And the exercise right here is I picked a few and then I said, look, Army, FORSCOM, AMC, and in this particular case, they were doing chemical and biological. So that was a big command in there that we found that spent a lot of money on what they were doing. So that's where they were going to go. And then you force yourself in your activities to go in that direction. All right, the next bullet here, pick agencies with money. This is really important. The reason I've always talked against knocking on the door of EPA, Department of Education, Department of State, these agencies that were under attack from different groups in the government who would try to undercut their spending. I have no say about their missions. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying when somebody says they want to close the Department of Education, and I don't mean 2025, that's been said for at least a decade, right? A couple decades. And when you look and you hear that, then you start realizing a couple things. That's at risk. Plus, they don't spend as much. And I'm not trying to beat up on Department of Education, but it's a good example because it is under attack, right? But the idea is you want to pick agencies with money. So I would look towards, for example, if I'm doing construction, Army Corps of Engineers, for sure. I would look into the Army and maybe Installation Command if that's what they're doing. Find the people with the money. When you do that, you'll make sure that there's enough money being spent in contract awards that not only you can get what you want, but a lot of your competitors can. You don't want to go after 10 million in revenue from the Army and find out the Army's only contracting out $15 million, right? Because then all your competitors, you're all fighting. But if the Army is contracting out $15 billion and you go after 10 million, that's realistic. That's the way I like to pick agencies. Now, Department of Education, if it happens to fall in my door, fine. But otherwise, the agencies I'm trying to pick are the ones I could build really long-term, 10, 20-year relationships with. One rule that I have here, the last second to last bullet, it's a kind of a Neil says, if you will. But I really believe one person, one agency. You know, if you've got a company and you're starting to grow and you can afford a second business developer capture type person, give them their own agency, right? You can always work teams, but people have leads, but don't give somebody the Air Force and the Army as an example. Those are two massively huge departments. And they're departments under the DoD, right? Those two are huge. And if you're under, 20, 30, $40 million, then the chances of those people being so experienced they can handle that is slim. Second, the Army or the Air Force are so big, one person could be full-time busy inside of that one department, Army or Air Force, and really grow it for you. But when we sit there and say, hey, look, Sally, we want you to do Army. We also like to get in the Air Force. And don't forget about DoD because they spend a lot on our type of business. That's unrealistic. That person will just be underwater the whole time. But if you sit there and say, hey, Sally, stay in the Army. In fact, you can go into this one command, go get us $1 million, go get us $5 million, go get us $10 million. I have a friend who has $1 billion sales goal every year, $1 billion in one department, right? Department of Air Force, for example. Not any big areas. So it can be done, but that's something you really want to keep in mind. The one exception I put here is that there's always exceptions. Those are just not the norm. So I don't generally talk about it. But if you pick an agency and you're going after these targeted agencies and something else falls into your lap, the rule to that exception is it has to be a 100% slam dunk opportunity, meaning it was built for your company. Because then it's not much of a distraction. You're not going to try to learn that agency or do anything special. You're like, let's respond to there. Or in fact, let's team up and go with somebody else. But you treat that as an absolute one-off, and it should be a 90-10 rule. 90% of your company's effort is towards this strategic plan, who you chose to go after, and 10% can be okay to be reactive to people who come into your world or whatever, right? But only 10%. Otherwise, you're now, the closer you go past 10%, the more you're turning your company into a reactive rather than proactive company. Hopefully that makes sense. If it does, do me a favor, put customers rock in the chat. And it gives me a chance to drink water. Okay. So the first thing you do on your strategic plan is choose which customers we're going after and how much money we want from them. Remember, I set a revenue goal for 2026. Let's call it $10 million, right? And by the way, that $10 million, often it's new money, right? I would raise that goal up to make sure you understand the difference between what are option years that you're pretty sure are going to come in and what's net new revenue. And the goal in here is I want to add 10 million net new revenue, meaning all brand new revenue next year. And when I do that, then I need to say how much is going to be prime contracted, how much subcontract. If you haven't heard me say this before, there's 3 ways to make money in the federal government. You can make money as a subcontractor under a small business, easiest thing to do. The second easiest thing to do is to prime contract with a federal agency. That's because they have a much better, they're more comfortable taking risks than the third way, which is subcontracting under large businesses. So small business subcontracting, large business subcontracting, and priming. We already talked about priming. And so on this slide, we're talking about subcontracting. And these I call strategic partners. You want to determine who those people are. First step is to make sure whoever you're going to choose, they align 100% with the agencies you're trying to get into. If you chose the Department of Navy and then you said NAVSUP, NAVWAR, and NAVC, then you want to find strategic partners who are in that same world. Let me just show you really quick what I'm talking about. So I already talked about the prime contracting. That's the top of the wheel. The bottom right side of the wheel, it says subcontracting. I've got large primes and small primes. And I'm saying I want to get $2 million in revenue next year just from being a subcontractor, right? I might change that. If I'm newer and I don't have as much past performance, I might do 80% subbing and 20% priming. But then I'm determining exactly who I want to prime with for larges and smalls. It should be the same thing. At the moment, I put guidance in there to tell you, look, I'm looking for small primes who are in DOD because that's where I want to go. And I want two service disabled, 2 women-owned, 2 hub-zone, and 2 8A. So I can go after any opportunity. And I would probably look to these people and make sure that they're on the contract vehicles that my target customers are using. Right? I can work with everybody else, somebody that doesn't have a contract vehicle, et cetera. I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to talk. But my strategic proactive approach into my agencies means I need only strategic partners, specifically strategic partners who are in the agency I want to get into, who are on the vehicles that I want to use, and who have complementary services that I do. So you want to align those folks to your target agency in all ways. The third bullet I have here is you want to educate your strategic partners on your plan, right? You're not here to live their plan or be reactionary to them. You want strategic partners who will know and understand what you're trying to build for your company, where you're trying to go. And you also want to know where do they want to go. That's mutual commitment, a commitment to mutual growth, right? You want to know each, but you want to make sure you are educating your partner on where you're trying to go. Hey, John, where I'm really trying to go is in the Navy, but specifically these 3 agencies. I'm very focused on these 3. This is where I think our 2027 or 2026 revenue is coming from. And these are the opportunities I want to find, right? That's what I want. By the way, what do you want, right? I want to pay attention so we help each other. But what I don't want is for the prime to drive me everywhere they want to go. I've seen this lots of times. I talk to you about the Army. Next thing you know, we're talking about DHS. I'm like, I don't want anything to do with DHS. Example. All right, number 4, determine your 2026 revenue. Same thing I talked about with priming, subcontracting, same thing. You want to sit there and say, how much is going to go prime? How much is going to be sub? In the subcontracting, how much am I going to get from a large prime? And how much am I going to get from a small business prime? And this is really important because remember, I was talking about FOMO. You set your goals and you drive towards them. You really want to establish $1 million, let's say, in revenue with small businesses so that you can build those relationships with them for future contracts. So it's really important that you determine where you're, determine that revenue goal and how that split's going to happen within the subcontract pool. The last thing on this slide about choosing your strategic partners is you want to, this is my recommendation, but you want to convert whatever your revenue goal is into bodies or people or full-time equivalents, right? FTEs. And the reason I say it's realistic goals is because sometimes money is unrealistic. We're like $1 million, $10 million, what does that mean? But my last company, I did Microsoft SharePoint services. Our standard rate, we did almost all fixed price. So we had a blended rate of 125. We almost always had 125 as a rate. That's really easy for me because for loose numbers, 125 times 2 is $250,000 a year in revenue. In $1 million, that's 4 people. If I round up a little bit to make sure, I need 5 people for every $1 million, right? That's a little conservative estimate there, but I need 5 FTEs to get that. If I am targeting 16 strategic partners to build relationships with to drive towards my 2026 revenue, and I only need 5 people to get $1 million, or in this case, it was $2 million, right? So I need 10 people. Now I start looking at, can I get 1 person per company? That's not unrealistic. If you've got a good relationship with a partner, if you're bringing them into your prime contract opportunities and giving them teaming shares over there, this is normal. We call it competimates, right? One day I'm competing, one day I'm teaming with you. And so converting it to FTEs makes it easy for you to go, we know how many people we need. And everybody on the team knows that. In order for us to grow this amount of revenue, we need to add 10 people to our company that are fully billable. By the way, just reinforcing this message, right? One team with one plan, chasing one goal. The whole idea of putting this information down where I can see where I'm priming and exactly which customers, which teaming partners I'm going to be connecting with, or which strategic partners, and how much money is coming from it. When I have that, and everybody in my company has it, we have it on our wall. We're all living and breathing it. We can all communicate the exact same thing to ourselves and to external people. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about here is clarifying exactly what you sell. This is so important. And it's funny, I didn't really start doing this until I started working with companies about to graduate from small to large, and I realized they did not have an understanding of what they sold. I always did. Every one of my companies, we sold this one thing and we were really, really good at it. But I would go into some of these larger, small companies getting ready to graduate, and I would talk to many people individually, and they would say different things about what they sell. And that was where, this was many years ago, but where I really came down on this idea that you have to niche down and you have to have a clear, focused offer, one that everybody knows. I put here that people buy from those they know, like, and trust. And the reason I bolded the word know is because if I don't know what you sell, then I don't really know you. I know of you, but that doesn't do me any good if I'm over here and I'm not seeing you at the moment and you are not in my mind. Knowing in this know, like, and trust is when I know you whether you're there or not. And the only way I can know you is if you have a clear, focused offer. Oh man, I didn't realize how fast the time had gone. Sorry. And I like ending on time. I might actually go a little bit longer just to finish this, but if you have to bolt, you bolt. Anyways, you have to have a clear, focused offer, something that's really easy for people to understand. I put Chris Moffitt down at the bottom, right? All things training. That's starting to sink into my head over and over again. You need to help everyone know what you do. So make sure you have that clear, focused offer. Just a reminder on the wheel as you look at it, right? You got the top, which is the prime contracting and who we're selling to. The bottom right is who we're working with to achieve our goals. And the left-hand side is what do we sell? And I break it up into if you sell products and services, like I sold some products very specific to my services, then you want to put that in, but you make it very clear to your entire company, this is what we sell. Okay, let me give you 3 things to remember from today's training. And I know that last slide I kind of went through fast. You can come back and watch the retraining. By the way, I've done training like this 10, 20 times before, so you can definitely find it. This is training I typically do for larger, small businesses. But here's what I want you to remember from today's training, especially as you're thinking about 2026 and how can I have success starting today. First thing is choose your customers and your partners. These are who I'm going to work with and sell to. These are my strategic partners who I am going to subcontract under. That's the first bullet. Second thing I want you to remember is that you need to clarify what you sell so that we can know who you are and what you sell. And the third thing is just start today. Don't wait till the end of the year to start planning 2026. Do it today. It will change your whole activity for end of the year spending. You might be able to land your entire, if you're a smaller, let's say under 50 million, you might be able to land your 2027 revenue goals all with end of the year spending, or certainly with end of the calendar year spending. And that's something that needs to happen today. So put your plan in place and you're going to have success. Hey, if you're a company, especially if you're a company doing 2 million plus, because that's kind of the threshold for my workshops, and you're looking to accelerate in these target agencies, reach out to me, put workshop in the chat, and I'll talk to you about our BD Accelerator workshop. It's the weekend. I hope you have a great weekend. Just remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I will see you in the next training.